So, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. So what we're looking for is just a little bit, almost like your sales pitch for Rage, and what do you guys plan to do with it? We already saw the video demonstration, so we're well versed in it. But just for our readers, so that they get to hear your side of why they should be excited, what they should be looking forward to. Just a little bit of a synopsis.
Well, Rage, first of all, is the first new IP from id in over a decade. So pretty exciting to have those guys who are obviously incredibly well known for Quake and Doom and Wolfenstein, and for being the inventors of the first-person shooter, to be coming up with new IP and going in a slightly different direction. I think with Doom and Quake, those guys established themselves as in the first-person shooter genre. But with Rage, what they're doing is taking it from that corridor-based, interior-only type of shooter to something that's much more open, and not just open in terms of being non-linear, but some of the open exploration that's involved, bringing out a lot more of the stories and the characters of the world, as opposed to just here's a gun, there's something to shoot, proceed. So I think that's what. Obviously the visuals, this is the first thing. You look at the game, you're like, oh, okay, that's ridiculous. And the guys have been hard at work on id Tech 5, and this will obviously be the first game with id Tech 5. So doing some pretty amazing things graphically, 60 frames a second on all 3 platforms, so really high level of performance. But beyond that, taking the first-person shooter for id where it hasn't been before, where you've got interesting characters, locations to explore, interiors and exteriors, all these different bandit clans, and each one, they look different, they've got their own personality. I think all of that just makes for a much richer, fuller experience. And then you add to that, which is what is essentially an entire racing game just dumped inside of a first-person shooter, where you've got all these different vehicles and upgrades, and you've got weapons you can put on, so there's racing, there's vehicle combat, and all of that. It's like you can almost have that be a separate game, and it's just a small offshoot of what they're doing, because they wanted to add some additional layers to what they were always known for, which is the really cool first-person shooter. And then all the gadget stuff, I think it's really great. The turrets and the sentry bots and all the remote control bomb cars. I think all of that just adds another layer to the first-person combat.
Perfect. Let's see. What's the multiplayer stuff? That seems to be the number one thing that this day and age, with like first-person shooters. Are you ready to discuss any of these?
No, we're not talking about what they're up to yet. So we are doing multiplayer, but it'll be a little while before we take the wraps off of what they've got planned.
Okay. What about like release dates? Do you guys?
What we're saying is 2011. We haven't given anything more specific than
so calendar year 2011.
Yeah, next year. Yeah.
Okay, I'm good. I don't want to take too much of your time.
I have one small question.
Sure. Good.
You have 3 good-looking to one established first-person shooter. How are you going to work differentiating and marketing each differently?
It's a good question. The thing is, when you take Fallout New Vegas, which is post-apocalyptic role-playing, and you put it up next to Rage, which is post-apocalyptic first-person shooter, and you set it next to Brink, which is kind of world gone to hell, brink of civil war. I guess on the surface they seem to be kind of similar thematically, but I think once you dive in, you see that they are actually very different experiences. That Brink focuses a lot more on this idea of movement and freedom of movement throughout the world. It focuses on really, really high levels of character customization and this progression between single-player, co-op, and multiplayer, where you're this persistent character through all 3 modes. Fallout is obviously big, open-ended, go wherever you want, do whatever you want, role-playing at its core. It's got the shooter aspects, it's got the VATS and all of that stuff, but it's a very different experience than you're going to get in a core first-person shooter. And then Rage is kind of this interesting mix of really, really excellent first-person combat with a much deeper story and character development, a bit more of an open-ended exploration than you're going to get, say, in Brink, where you're just not wandering wherever you want. You've got specific missions. So I think each one of them serves a slightly different audience and brings something different to the table.
Very cool. If you had, just to wrap this up, if you had one sort of selling feature for our readers to get really excited about Rage, what would that be?
I just think it's what it is doing with their next big first-person shooter. I don't think it's any one thing. I think it's a mix of all of those things that they're bringing. That it's not just a first-person shooter. That they've got all of these other elements to it, the locations and the characters and the gadgets and the driving and the interior, and I think all of that stuff just makes for a very different kind of shooter than you've seen from it, and really than you've seen from anybody before. And I think that's that's what's got the buzz around the show that we've gotten, and it's really exciting to hear folks responding to it.
Well, I'll tell you this, man, you're probably going to get our best of E3 award. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Absolutely superb.
Thank you. Bye.
You have a business